Hey guys, Yuri Ezips here for CSM Practice, the customer success strategy consulting firm. How many of you have ever tried to report on renewal forecast? How do you detect churn early and should you report on it as well? Are there different categories that you need to apply in your renewal forecasting? And should you even report, or how should you really report on previous churn? So today, I am going to dedicate this video session on churn reporting and renewal risk reporting as well. So stay tuned. We'll dive right in. Today, I want to talk about what are we seeing other companies are doing. And so I wanted to share one dashboard that was actually shown on LinkedIn, which is the forecast renewal current quarters report produced by Orgus. He actually started this thread, which I'm going to add the link to it in the link to the video below. And so you could see really interestingly, he has 5 categories by which he's defining risk of churn. And so you could see that the first graph is just showing actual data. He wants to show that next to how he's managing forecasts for renewal risk. And so he's not really showing the renewal forecast as much as he's doing the forecast for the renewals based on the assessment of risk. So he's saying, look, between $500,000 to 1.2, so $600,000 is pretty much sure to guarantee to be renewal. Very good, very healthy accounts. But then we have about over $100,000 that had given notice, which really means those accounts that have already given a cancellation. So you tried to save them. They said, nope, not going to happen. So they're very, very high risk. The other ones are currently at risk. I'm not specifically sure what's at risk versus red. I guess at risk is that they're red and we think they're going to churn. So pretty sure they're going to churn, but they haven't given notice yet. And then red means, I don't know, not displaying healthy. For me, red means at risk, but maybe what they're doing is what I usually advise to do, which is look at red, yellow, green, not in terms of churn risk, but in terms of how far they are towards best in class. And so if you did that, then there's a big difference between at risk and red, because some accounts could be red, meaning slow onboarding, or they're not really advocating for us. They don't have enough resources, but they are using the system. It looks kind of fun, but not like best in class. Maybe executive is not engaged enough. Whatever the reason is, they could be in red, but not at risk. Sometimes that happens, right? So if you did that, maybe that's the red. And then yellow means they're a little closer to being best in class, but not yet. So interesting to see on the thread itself, can like what Orr is saying, how he's classifying between red and at risk. But that's basically what he's saying. And so green to him is like, for sure, they're going to happen. And then I think what's really interesting is how he does the actual analysis. Not a lot of companies can do that. You actually have to work with a CFO or your IT department, if you have one, to make sure that when you're tracking renewal deals, you can track separately or place a status when the deal is closed won or closed lost. If it's closed lost and it's a renewal type deal, it should be marked as churn. If it was renewed, but for a smaller amount, instead of just doing closed won, you kind of want to use downgraded so that you can create this kind of report. And then pending renewal, all of these might be renewal opportunities that are late to renew. So they're still pending. They're just waiting maybe for some logistics or something, or there's like negotiation around whether it's going to be a downgrade or an upsell with a discount. And then there's the renewed. I don't know if I would put pending renewal here unless it was a delayed renewal, because all of these should be pending. If you liked what you've heard so far, that's awesome. More coming in a second here, but in the meantime, I want you to click that like button so that YouTube knows that this is great content and you can start sharing it with others. I did another video about the renewal process with Taylor Johnston from SalesLoft, who actually said that they create the renewal opportunity as soon as one is closes. And then they added a couple of fields to say what's the projected renewal amount versus what's the estimated one. So the estimated one would be the one that's going to be adjusted. So if there's a downgrade or an upsell, it's going to be reflected here. And they actually give incentive to renewals that happen early. And so that could be another category that you can add here. Instead of pending renewals, you could say late renewals or early renewals versus renewed at the time, the month that they were supposed to. So, because I think that's another solid indicators for the strength of your company. And same thing here, instead of maybe doing notice given, at risk, red, yellow, green, I would say how many are expected or indicated that they are willing to renew early. And also you could do a forecast based on the amount that's forecasted by your team versus the amount that's in the system. And so if your CSMs already expect renewal to happen a little differently than the amount, let's say right now they're at a contract of $100,000, but they're expecting it to come in at $125,000 or $85,000, you can compare, what's the current contract to renew versus what is expected. I think that's also very interesting to your management team. Besides that, some of the things that you want to correlate with the renewal process and the ability to forecast renewal is to have a solid code red process. So if there is a customer that's not expected to renew, as soon as you think that, there should be a save playbook. And if that doesn't happen, the CSM should escalate it up in a code red process. I recommend creating a code red report that's automatically sent to specific leadership team or to specific teams. For example, you might have as part of your code red an escalation in priorities to all tickets related to that customer. How do you communicate that to the support team? You need to think about that. Before we continue, don't forget, subscribe to our YouTube channel and smash that notification button so that you don't miss out on any new videos. One thing that Orguzha was mentioning is the accuracy of the forecast. How do you guarantee that? Or how do you make sure that you look at it with a vernacular of estimated renewals being accurate? Like, how do you know that the forecast, that anything that's like pending is actually close to what we can expect? So that's one of the reasons why I had those actuals close by to the pending one, because then you can compare apples to apples and you could say, well, is this estimate actually reasonable? And like I said, the video I've made with Taylor Johnston at SalesLoft about the renewal process recommends actually having the renewal opportunity in Salesforce opened for as long as possible, because then the CSM can constantly update what is expected to be actually coming in. And according to that video, when I interviewed her, she said that brought in the renewal forecast to an accuracy level of 2% gap between that and the actual numbers that came in. So if you're looking to improve the accuracy, have your CSMs be in the habitude of updating that estimated amount based on their experience with that account come in as frequently as possible during the year. So as soon as they learn something, they should update it. If all else fails, just compare it against actuals to say, is the forecast reasonable? Once you have this all in place, and again, that sometimes takes some work to change management, how your CSMs operate and estimate forecasts for renewals, as well as how can your CFO or your Salesforce team or whatever CRM system you're using to adjust to be able to track this at the appropriate level. And so once you've done all that, you might want to take it to the next level. And like a more advanced level of renewal forecasting would be to analyze it by cohort. So instead of just analyzing it by the risk of renewal, also consider doing it by the segment of customers, large customers versus the lower cohort, different regions, by CSM, by all those industry, anything that makes sense. And sometimes some of you might have multiple products. So it might be also interesting to gauge for the renewal forecast by different products or groups of products. You can also look at it not just from product type, but also add contract type. Do we see a higher renewal rate for those that are month to month, year to year contracts, or multi-year contracts? In general, what I've found is that most customers that have a multi-year contract with you have more longevity to actually create success cases with you and increase value over time. They give you more longevity to do that. And so they tend to churn a lot less. You could also analyze by use case. So if your company has a definitive amount of use cases, you can analyze it by that. I recently watched a presentation by Cisco at the TSW conference in 2021. They're actually comparing the renewals versus the value score that their customers are providing. And so there could be a mechanism to ask customers or gauge for how much value each customer is actually getting versus their propensity to renewal or the actual renewal numbers, meaning churn, downgrade, upsell, or straightforward renewal, or early renewal versus late renewal. Now, many of your customer success systems might not include the ability to showcase what we call a SaaS bridge analysis, where you could say, okay, this is how many we're supposed to renew, that much was upsold, downsold, etc. I'm going to show the graph now. Now, many of you are familiar with this type of graph, which is also great in analyzing actual renewals, but I think you can also add that in your arsenal for forecasting renewals in a more accurate manner. What most are struggling with when looking at this graph is how the hell am I going to track it? Are there systems in place to allow me to do this type of analysis? So you should always ask your customer success software company if they can enable that. I think there's very few of them that do. But beyond that, some are actually creating this using systems like Tableau, as well as Google Data. And just FYI, your Excel and Google Sheets both have the ability to create waterfall graphs. So if you wanted to create something like that for your cohort analysis, you could definitely use those functionalities to create something that's a bit more visual. But yeah, I know very, very few customer success softwares actually have this ability. So I think in terms of software and tools, we're a little bit limited still, but if anybody does create them in a system, I recommend watching that. A while back, I interviewed Michael Taylor from Click Dimensions. He's the chief customer officer there. And he actually showed these graphs. And I believe he created them with Click Dimensions, which is not supposed to be a BI solution, but he had some reporting capabilities. So I think the bottom line is as long as you can harvest all your data from your CRM system, if your CRM system does not have great BI reporting tools, move them over to Google Data or your BI solution of choice, and then just slice the data from there. One last thing to add to your renewal dashboards beyond the renewal forecast we just talked about is potentially to augment it with some, double clicking. For example, you might want to do what are your top churn reasons for actual churn data in the past 2 or 3 quarters? What are your top 5 or top 80% of revenues that are at risk right now? What customers are they? What account? And how much ARR is at risk? And just include those top accounts that make 80% of the total amount that is at risk, so that management gets a highlight of who those accounts are. That brings that into their attention, and they'd be able to collaborate with you to save those accounts that are otherwise are at risk of churn. Now, everybody that I have ever interacted with and talked about this topic to really recommends updating the forecast for renewal very frequently, as much as weekly or monthly. The second most important thing is to create visibility of that renewal forecast with the executive team and other teams that are supposed to support you in making sure that those customers renew, such as the support team, your management team, possibly your product team. And then finally, it's super, super important to create some very clear calls to action. What are we doing as a company about these accounts that are at risk? What is our save playbooks for those who give us notice? What are we doing about those green accounts to increase renewals to expansions? I believe that when you have a solid strategy, you will see improvement over time of not just your forecasts, accuracy of forecast, but also in between actuals period over period. So hopefully you found this session helpful. If you did, give it a like. That hugely helps our channel. Share this with other customer success teams that are struggling with the renewal process or want to embrace better renewal forecast methodologies. So I look forward to seeing you at the next video, and don't forget, subscribe.